So as you can see from the title and thumbnail of this video, I am going to be picking who I think would win if Deji and Logan Paul were to fight each other. But as we all know, the fight is most likely not going down ever. But shout out to Josh the Mac for recommending I do this video. But for this hypothetical, of course, I'm going to pick who I think would win if they ever fought and why. So there's a saying in combat sports that goes, you're only as good as your last performance. So let's delve deep into both of these guys' last fights. And you might be asking, yo, why are you doing this? Well, because it further supports my argument on who I think would win the fight. But this matchup is actually very interesting because as we mentioned from the previous, when comparing KSI to Deji and then comparing Logan to Jake, Deji and Logan are very similar and KSI and Jake are very similar. Both lack a little bit of that dedication to the sport, whereas KSI and Jake, they put more of their all heart and soul into this type of sport, whereas Logan and Deji, they're similar in that they're not taking it as serious, most likely just doing this for fun. So first, what we are going to be looking at is their punch count scores from each of their fights, and we're going to compare the two just because stylistically, it gives us a better look at who is more active and how active are they going round by round, and are they consistent each and every round. And the funny thing is, Deji's last fight against Swarms, there isn't any CompuBox or punch score that I could find out there. So I did my own research. I watched the entire fight. I counted every punch thrown, every punch landed. So I have this stat for you also. And of course, we're just going to go based on the CompuBox scores from the Logan Paul Dylan Dennis fight. So as you can see, the first round, Deji threw 27 strikes, landed 7. Second round, he threw 94, a much higher thrown strike. He threw a lot of strikes. A lot of these strikes were from Swarms just covering up in the corner and Deji just unloading 8, 9, 10 punch combinations on him. He only landed 25 of those. Third round, he throws 42, lands 14. In the fourth and final round, he throws 35, but only lands 4. The first round was very much a fill-out round. The second round was more of a Swarms covering up in the corner. You know, a lot of those strikes can't really count as landed strikes because Swarms puts up that really high, tight guard. So a lot of Deji's strikes were landing on the gloves, and a lot of them were blocked. But most of Deji's strikes were actually counted for body shots. Swarms having that really high, tight guard, he's very susceptible to the body. So every time Deji went to the body, those were clear landed strikes. Whereas when Deji was more so trying to headhunt, all those strikes were pretty much blocked from Swarms. So that's where you could see the big discrepancy where he threw 94, but he only landed 25. And then the round after that, threw 42, only landed 14, very similar. And then in the last round, he threw 35, only landed 4. A lot of those strikes were misses because he was throwing them from too far out of range, most likely just trying to keep Swarms off of him so he can walk away with the clear victory because he was clearly up 3-0. You know, the fourth round could have been a little bit of a toss-up due to the inactivity of both guys. I would say Deji might have been slightly more active, but I think in that round, Swarms may have even outlanded him a little bit. So either a 4-0 or 3-1 to Deji. But for totals, he threw 198 strikes, landed a total of 50 of them for a total percentage of 25.3%. So that's not bad. It's not bad. You would really like to see it more in the 30s or 40s, but 25% really isn't all that bad. I would say it's mostly due to that last round. Deji just throwing a lot of punches out there from completely out of range that Swarms was easily able to slip and move right out of the way of. But here's what's interesting, because when you compare Deji's to Logan Paul's in his fight with Dylan Dennis, you'll see that even through 6th round over a longer fight, Logan Paul was not only more accurate, but he was more consistent, he landed more and threw more. So we could definitely tell a clear distinction between the two in their punch counts. Logan Paul throwing a total of 330, only landing 108 with a percentage of 32.7. But that is only one side of this full equation. So from this, we can easily tell, number one, Logan is much more of an active fighter than Deji is. And number two, Logan appears to be a little bit more accurate. The shots that he's throwing has a higher percentage of actually landing through the guard than the shots that Deji throws. But that's about all that we can take away from this. So what else can we look at? Well, we can look at their personalities when they're fighting in the ring. Logan Paul tends to come forward, tends to fight long, except for when he has these spurts where he gets a little too over aggressive and, you know, he gets a little too wild in there. But Logan looks really good whenever he's fighting at distance, utilizing those jabs, those 1-2s, the straight right hands. You know, he looks really good at distance. It's just everything else when you want to throw actual power and hooks and things like that, that's when Logan gets a little carried away with those arm punches. But at distance, he looks good, which in a fight with Deji would be a really big problem because Deji is significantly smaller. But from what I was able to see from rewatching that Swarms fight, is seeing that actually Deji kind of has a tough time understanding his range. He gets a little bit lost in there and he throws a lot of punches from far out of range, and it really showed in that 4th round, which someone more his size like Swarms, Deji was throwing punches from way out of range and Swarms was easily able to get out of the way of them. With someone like Logan who has that reach, that is going to be a severe problem for Deji. I will say this though, when it comes down to skills and fundamentals and actual technique, Deji by far, he understands it, he gets it. He just lacks a little bit of that power. He doesn't really have that sting in his punches. And you can see it also in the Swarms fight. His punches weren't really able to get through the guard of Swarms. There's a lot of fighters out there that, yeah, you can have your hands up, but they hit so hard and so precise that it just will split the guard and connect with you anyways. But Deji, it appears like he just doesn't have the precision. He doesn't have the power along with the precision that to have those shots split the guard and land even if someone has that high tight guard, or even land around the guard on the ear. Deji tried a lot of those type of shots and even so wasn't able to really land them as much. So I think Deji would have a really tough time fighting someone like Logan Paul. If Logan were Deji size, anyone Deji size, it's a good matchup. But the problem is Logan's size and his reach. It would be too big of a problem for Deji. He'll be way too out of range. He doesn't really know how to come into range. In his last fight, a lot of him coming into range was Swarm just covering up in the corner, so Deji was able to just walk forward into range. But I did see that he had a lot of difficulties punching his way into range and then letting his combinations go. He would just let off 1-2 punches and then let Swarm circle away and get off. If he does that against Logan, Logan will do the same. He'll back up, circle away, and get out of range. He's not going to just stand there with his feet planted. But also, we got to think, who is the more timid fighter? And to be honest, Deji always comes off as the more timid, you know, a little bit afraid. Unfortunately, in that Floyd Mayweather fight, you can tell he fought afraid. He looked afraid in there. And going up against someone like Logan, I think if Logan touches him up, he's going to start to shy away a little bit from the contact, shy away from the actual fight. And he might fight a little bit more passive and give up the rounds. And he might be okay with taking the loss. And that's just what happens to some fighters in the ring. Some fighters, they get in there, they're very confident, think they're going to win. And then once the fight gets going and they start losing rounds, they start going down, you know, then they're just like, they're okay with losing. To be honest, if a Logan Paul and Deji fight were to go down, I see it going just like that. I think Logan stays very long, keeps Deji off of him. Deji has a hard time finding that range just because Logan is so much bigger than him. He just slowly and surely loses round by round to the point where he's just fine with losing because he isn't going to go into a firefight, into some brawl like KSI would. So if they were to fight, I would pick Logan to win on the scorecards because of the fact that, well, he's the more active fighter. He throws a lot more, he lands a lot more, so he's more accurate. And we can say, yeah, it was against a punching bag like Dylan Dennis, but I just don't think the Deji has the power like KSI does to make Logan really hesitate in there. But for sure, without a doubt, if this fight ever went down, I'd be rooting for Deji for sure because I expect him to be the underdog. But, you know, I expect that Logan would win this fight if it ever happened. But that's my thoughts on this fight. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Do you think Deji might take the win? Do you think the fight goes differently? I'm curious to see what your opinions are on this. As always, thank you all so much for the support, and I'll catch you in the next video.